Think about the last time you walked into a room full of people. Not a room of strangers. A room of people who know you. And you smiled. The right smile. Asked the right questions. Laughed at the right moments. And somewhere underneath all of that, somewhere very quiet, a version of you was watching the whole thing, waiting for it to end. You weren't faking interest in the people. You genuinely liked them. But you were faking the ease, the effortlessness, the sense that all of this is natural. Because for years, you've been performing a version of yourself that other people could understand. And you got very, very good at it. Today we're going to talk about that performance, where it came from, what it cost you, and what's actually waiting for you on the other side of it. No one sat you down and said, "Be more outgoing." Well, actually, some of you, someone did. But most of the time it was subtler than that. It was the teacher who praised you when you raised your hand in class, and ignored you when you were quiet and thinking deeply. It was the parent who said, "You should get out more." The friend who called you intense. The job interview where enthusiasm was rewarded far above reflection and precision. The world built a curriculum, and that curriculum had one core message. The person you naturally are is not quite enough. So you learned. You studied people the way an anthropologist studies a foreign culture. You watched how they moved through rooms, how they initiated, how they filled silences without discomfort. And you built a version of yourself that could do all of those things. A translated version. A version that made sense to everyone else. Dr. Rami Kaminsky, who first identified Otroversion, describes this as a kind of involuntary adaptation. The Otrovert doesn't lack social skill. They often develop it to an extraordinary degree, precisely because it never came automatically. They had to reverse engineer what others absorbed without thinking. What looks like confidence from the outside is often a very practiced performance from the inside. Here is what years of masking feels like from the inside. You go to a social event and you're fine, genuinely fine, for the first hour. Then something starts to drain. Not physically, not emotionally, something deeper. Like a battery that no one else in the room seems to have. And yours is running out. You drive home in silence. Not because you're sad, because the silence is the first real thing that's happened to you all evening. The mask isn't just exhausting, it's disorienting. When you spend enough years performing a version of yourself, something strange starts to happen. You begin to lose track of where the performance ends, and you begin. You answer questions about yourself, your preferences, your opinions, your desires, and you don't entirely trust the answer. Because you've been so carefully calibrated to give people what they expect, you're no longer sure what you actually think. This is one of the things people never talk about when they discuss authenticity. It's not that you decided to be fake. It's that the mask became the only face anyone ever asked to see. And eventually, you stopped taking it off even when you were alone. There's a particular kind of loneliness in being well-liked. Because every time someone tells you how warm you are, how easy to talk to, how engaging, part of you quietly thinks, "You don't actually know me." You know the translation. At some point, every performance sends a bill. For the Otrovert who has been masking for years, That bill shows up in different forms. Sometimes it's burnout, the kind that doesn't make sense on paper because you haven't been doing anything visibly difficult. But the effort of performing humanity differently than you naturally experience it, day after day, year after year, that effort is enormous. Sometimes it's relationships that feel hollow, connections built on the performed version of you, which means they can never quite reach the real one. And the more people love the mask, the more isolated the face behind it feels. Sometimes it comes as a crisis of identity. Who am I when I stop performing? Is there a self underneath all of this? Or did I construct one so long ago that I've forgotten the original? This isn't a personality disorder. This isn't trauma. This is the completely predictable result of asking someone to live outside their own nature for long enough that they begin to forget what that nature actually was. Here is what people are afraid to find when they start to drop the performance. They're afraid there's nothing there. But that's not what's waiting. What's waiting is a person who observes the world with unusual depth. A person who doesn't need external noise to feel alive. A person who thinks in longer arcs than most people around them. Who processes more slowly and more completely. What's waiting is an Otrovert. The same person who learned to perform extroversion out of necessity. That person, when they stop performing, doesn't become cold or antisocial or difficult. They become precise. They become honest. They stop filling silences that don't need to be filled. They stop laughing at things that aren't funny. They stop shrinking themselves to fit rooms that were always too small for them anyway. The people who stay, who see that and stay, those are your people. And the skills you built while masking, they don't disappear. The social intelligence, the ability to read a room, the empathy you developed by studying people from the outside, all of that is still yours. You just stop using it to hide. You start using it to connect. If you've spent years performing a version of yourself that isn't quite true, I want to say something plainly. You didn't do anything wrong. You did what any intelligent person does when the world gives them a clear signal. You adapted. You survived. You built something functional out of a need that was never really yours. But surviving and living are not the same thing. And you've been surviving long enough. The mask served you. It protected you. And it cost you. And at some point, maybe right now, the cost becomes larger than the protection. That's the moment the mask starts to come off. Not in one dramatic gesture, slowly, in quiet rooms, in honest conversations, in the simple choice to stop translating yourself for people who never asked to hear the original. If this video found you at the right moment, there's something in the description I put together for people in the middle of that process. And if this channel is new to you, the last few videos will give you the full picture of what Otroversion actually is and why it changes everything. I'll see you in the next one. Elsewhere Minds, for those who never quite fit in.